Hey friend, in today's watercolor tutorial, I'm going to be teaching how to paint the Old Faithful Geyser in Yellowstone National Park. Without further ado, let's get painting. I'm going to be using Prussian Blue, Perylene Green, Sap Green, Burnt Umber, Payne's Gray, and Yellow Ochre. The page I've set down here of watercolor paper is a size 5 by 7 inches. I'll also be using some white gouache, and the brush sizes I'm using are size 12, 2, and 6 round brushes by Princeton. And I'm also going to be lifting some color to give some highlights for our hot spring that's going to be going up throughout the blue sky. To get started, I am going to loosely sketch some of the ground here. And I'm just going to do kind of a loose, rough edge using our burnt umber, just watered down. And this kind of style of painting is going to be more watery, using a lot of wet and wet technique. And I'm just going to drag that pigment down. I am also going to just lightly sketch a little bit of a silhouette of the outer area of our geyser here, Old Faithful. Okay, and next up I'm just gonna fill this area in with a little bit more of a wash of our burnt umber here. And again, I'm kind of using the belly, the side of my brush here, because I want this to be a little bit more of a rougher texture. It's more loose. Okay, and now I'm going to add just a few kind of touches of a little bit more of a deeper saturation of Payne's Gray, just to add some shading and depth. And I'm going to bring this area in a little bit so it's not a perfectly round circle. And then I'm just going to grab a little bit of yellow ochre just to add a touch of some bright kind of mustard color here. And then I'm just gonna layer on a little bit more layered burnt umber. And I'm just moving my hand just loosely, using the tip of my brush and just some kind of jagged motion here. Okay, so next up, I am going to apply some of our sky and our greenery. And this area is going to be really loose intentionally, because we really want our sky to have some highlighting here where Old Faithful will be kind of doing its magic with the highlight there. So I'm going to take some water using my size 12 larger brush here, and I'm just going to apply a wash of water all across the page, all the way to where it meets the opening of Old Faithful. And I'm just gonna touch it to where it meets the edge of the burnt umber yellow ochre ground here. Alrighty. So first I'm going to take some Prussian Blue and I'm gonna start working my way kind of using the corners here, just doing some rounded, muted corners. So I start here and then I just drag it down off towards the left and towards the right, all the way down. And then I'm just gonna slowly bring in some of that Prussian Blue. And I'm gonna intentionally leave an opening just where this geyser kind of will shoot from this opening here. And as the page is absorbing the water, I'm just gonna add a few areas of a more concentrated amount of the Prussian Blue, just to give this more contrast. And keep in mind, I will have some pine trees in this like top inch above the ground here. So I'm gonna leave just anywhere between 1/2 inch and 1 inch of area here without too saturated a Prussian Blue. But the green will layer really nicely on top of the blue regardless. So now I'm just going to add just a few touches of the blue here to kind of just act as like a negative space, just white pop of color or contrasting against the white areas. And then from here, after adding just a couple areas of this muted toned Prussian Blue, I'm gonna take my my smaller brush, my size 6 brush, and I'm gonna take just a little bit of Payne's Gray, and I'm gonna add just a few subtle touches of that in these corner areas here. Not too much, but just enough to give a little bit more contrast and dimension to the sky here. Just adding a few touches of it and just buffing it out by applying some pressure with the belly of my brush. And then from here, I am just gonna help kind of define this area a little bit by adding some watered down Payne's Gray and allowing it to kind of bleed out. And I'm gonna add just a few touches of the Payne's Gray in the center here. In just a couple areas. I don't want it to be overpowering, but it's just gonna add a little bit more depth. Okay, then from here, I am just gonna go ahead and add a little bit of greenery. So I'm gonna add first some Sap Green as kind of my highlight green. And I'm just gonna apply a little bit kind of angled upward towards the left. I'm gonna bring it down all the way to the kind of area where the highlight of Old Faithful will kind of pop. And I'll do the same thing on this right side. It's okay if the green kind of bleeds out. We kind of want this to be a very loose landscape. Nice and watery. And the foggy effect just kind of complements the foggy element of the geyser that's shooting upward. So I'm just layering a little bit more pops of green here. And just below where the green meets the ground, I'm gonna add just a touch of Burnt Umber just to help bleed this area here and kind of buff out that transition just a touch. And then I'm just going to take a wet brush and just smooth that area out. Okay, and then from here, I'm going to take a little bit of Perylene Green, which is one of my favorite greens to work with. It's super rich and kind of more dark, and I'm actually going to switch gears to my size 2 brush instead of using my size 6 brush here. And I just want to mimic some very loose pointed tree texture in our greenery here. And I'm just taking my size 2 brush and just doing some vertical, almost grass-like texture, just to add a touch more detail and texture to our greenery here. Still allowing the sap green to pop there as a highlight, but I just want to kind of mimic some loose interpretation here of some wet and wet pine trees. Now I'm just doing a few more loose pine trees that are almost subtly cone-like in texture up towards the top here. So just kind of mimicking a textured cone-like shape. I'm just adding a few of those towards the top just to make the pine trees kind of pop a little bit in just a couple areas, not overtaking the ridge of the mountain area because I do want this to be more loose of a style of painting, but just to mimic a little bit more of the pine tree action, I'm just adding a few pops of this kind of cone-like shape, and I'm using Perylene Green with the size 2 brush to get that kind of small dainty detail. From here, I'm going to take my size 6 brush and kind of fill in this pool with just a little bit of Prussian Blue. And I'm just doing a wash here to start. And then from here, I kind of want to buff out this area where the the geyser meets the pool here. Just want to kind of buff that out a little bit. So I'm just applying pressure with my paper towel here. And then from here, I just want to add a few more detailed elements of the Prussian Blue. And I'm just doing kind of a left to right motion with the tip of my size 6 brush. Keeping some highlights in there. And then I want this inwardmost area here that's facing the viewer to be the most concentrated amount of the pool here. And I'm just going to add a touch of the blue around the edges and kind of a textured, variegated line here. And then from here, I want to take just a touch of Payne's Gray, and I'm going to add some Payne's Gray into this little area here that's the darkest, just layering on top of that more concentrated amount of the Prussian Blue. And then I'm going to add a touch of the Payne's Gray to outline the edges here on the left and right side. Then from here, I'm going to take my watered down brush and just smooth out some of these edges just a little bit. And then I'm going to add just a touch of our white gouache. And again, this part is totally optional. But I'm just going to use my size 2 brush here just to kind of layer and texturize on top of this pool here. Just adding a touch of texture using the white gouache. Then from here, I want to just add a little bit of that kind of texture just towards the left and right edge here. Getting a little bit of water to just kind of buff it out slightly. And kind of bringing it downward into the mouth of the geyser here. Alrighty, And for some finishing details, I would like to just take my size 2 brush and add just a little bit more dimension to the ground below. And I'm just going to take some Burnt Umber with a touch of Payne's Gray. And I just want to kind of outline and give some detail to the outside of this pool here. I'm leaving some gaps, but I'm just texturizing the outside of this border just to help make it pop a little bit. And then I'm going to take that same color, the blend of the Burnt Umber and Payne's Gray, and I'm going to add just a couple kind of loose, almost ring-like kind of shapes just around this geyser. Just very loose, and it looks very, very dark right now, but I'm just going to take a clean size 2 brush and just kind of smooth that out and buff it out while it's still wet. Just kind of dragging that pigment a little bit. And kind of shading these two kind of ring-like areas. Just kind of buffing those areas out a bit so they're not super defined, but just very simple and loose. I hope that you enjoyed this loose watercolor landscape of Old Faithful Geyser in Yellowstone National Park. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to my watercolor YouTube channel so you don't miss any further landscape tutorials.